All right, everyone, welcome back. Today we have a very, very special interview. We're in West Palm Beach live with the one and only Samuel Arms. Sam, you've been on my channel a bunch of times, but could you just tell the audience who you are, what you do, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, the last time I was on Aaron's show, one of the times I went over the electoral map, talking about what we thought was going to happen in the 2024 election. And so I'm a political strategist, so I pass legislation in Florida and throughout the United States. And so I work with clients either at the Florida level, at the national level, and then sometimes at the international level now. And yeah, I'm in West Palm, which is awesome. Big South Florida fans, but it's like the more north part of South Florida, what I think is the nicest part of South Florida. And of course, very close to Trump in his orbit, since we're literally can almost see Mar-a-Lago from here.
Yeah, absolutely awesome. So Sam recently had I guess it was recent. It was in like the past month or so. The picture that went viral on X with you at the Florida State Capitol.
Yeah.
Was that in the past month or so?
Actually, so I think that was now, because time flies so quickly. I think that was 2 months ago. But yeah, so right now, I'm in the middle of pushing a Bitcoin strategic reserve bill in the state of Florida, which the federal government beat us to as of Friday. What's today's date? Today is March the 8th. So the night of March the 6th, I think, is when Trump officially signed it. An executive order establishing a Bitcoin strategic reserve. And then we had that big conference with, I think, about 25 different crypto Bitcoin leaders who came and sat down with Trump and just vibed out on what they were going to do.
Yeah. So, and I also saw on your Twitter you were at the Trump party. I don't know which one it was, in Washington D.C. What was that for?
Oh, the inauguration. So I was at the crypto ball, and that's the crazy thing about the fact that it's March. Normally, the beginning part of the year is slow. This year, it's flown by. Yeah. So the inauguration was only March. So just over a month ago, Trump became officially president. That's crazy to say. Just over a month ago, January 21st. So I was at the crypto ball and celebrating, Trump's win and crypto's victory and all that cool stuff. And I was also super sick.
Yeah.
I probably got everyone else there sick.
So I guess the first thing, we should kind of talk about is what is going on with, I guess, Bitcoin in the state of Florida. So I guess we could start there, and then maybe we could talk about the broader U.S. So, what is going on in your world with Bitcoin in the state of Florida and things that could possibly be happening in this next couple of years?
Yeah, so in Florida specifically, right now our main priority for this legislative session is a Bitcoin strategic reserve, right? It's kind of a fancy marketing name, like we were talking about marketing earlier. All I'm saying is I want the state of Florida to be able to hold Bitcoin on its balance sheet or in its pension. We're a very financially sound and safe state. We run surpluses, not deficits, right? Like a lot of other states are in debt, their pensions are in debt and everything. Florida is very financially stable. So I want part of the surplus to go into Bitcoin, and I would love if Florida's pension, some of its pension went into Bitcoin, because by now it's been around long enough, it's legitimized enough. People say we're still early, and in some sense they're right. In another sense, I think we're very late now. But Bitcoin's an adult now. States should be able to start buying it. If the federal government's going to buy it too. So that's the main priority for this legislative session, which is happening right now. I'm literally going to be in Tallahassee next week, which is not a fun 6-hour drive. But that's the main priority right now. We always have some other bills circulating which aren't as cool or as popular. Like they're trying to regulate Bitcoin ATMs right now.
Okay.
And I'm trying to make sure that doesn't get screwed up. And then there's Article 12, which is just a part of the UCC about how definitions essentially, and just making sure all those definitions are sound and cool. But that's pretty much it for now. And then I have Florida elections. So after Florida's legislative session, it's campaign season, right, for 2026 here, and seeing who our next governor is going to be.
I kind of want to talk about that a little later, because there's been some interesting, I guess, things brewing in Florida when it comes to the governor race that's going on.
Yeah, Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
But before that, I want to kind of touch on the Bitcoin in Florida thing for the last time. How have you seen, because you've been, working for the crypto space in Florida now for years on end now, how have you seen things change since we've had this new administration come in, and how are things, I guess, different from the past administration when it comes to crypto in Florida and, Bitcoin?
I think we're going to see a lot more businesses start to move to Florida because before, a lot of people, and I've had this conversation all the time, a lot of international companies want to be on East Coast time. So they want to be on EST.
Yep.
And so traditionally to do that, they set up an office in New York City. But people still don't really like New York City, right? There's still like feelings of like COVID and that whole thing, and then still just the management there. Even though, funny enough, I do think New York will probably start to get better under Trump. And that's crazy to think about. I think people still would rather be in Florida. I think Florida's a spot. And so I think we're going to have a lot more companies relocate internationally here. It's just way better. And there's a huge sigh of relief. It's just a huge weight off the industry's shoulders. I mean, when you're not consistently being attacked and you don't have like just negativity and the threat of a lawsuit, and you can actually think about innovation or being a degenerate, right? Like we were talking about earlier, which maybe is the negative, right? Maybe there's more degeneracy in some of these crypto meme coins, right? Yeah. But even still, like it feels so much more freer. So now, as a state, on state strategy, it makes you think, okay, how can we be more competitive then? Because now, instead of just trying to be a defensive barrier against the U.S. federal government, now we're like, well, how do we outcompete? Because it's easy to just be a positive when there's a negative. It's hard to be a positive when there's other positives because you have to go above and beyond to be like, okay, how can we really get them here now? So everything's positive, though. Everything's good.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one thing that's, I guess, something you recently touched on your YouTube and stuff is the tariffs that have been going on in the United States, and Trump's been putting tariffs on China, Canada, etc. It's been causing, a lot of these high risk assets get sold off and stuff, aka crypto. So people are kind of, a lot of people in CT are kind of throwing a fit over the tariffs and everything. Yeah. But what are your opinions on the tariffs? And I want to hear, what are your thoughts on the tariffs and everything?
Well, let me start by saying I don't really watch my crypto.
Actually, explain what a tariff is first.
A tariff is just an increase in the cost of a good that's imported.
Yeah.
Right. So you can view it as a tax, right? It's a fee. So, okay, if you come outside of the United States, you have to pay an import fee, right? Is normally how it is. So technically, I think different than a tax, but it's not like a tax. I want to say this because a lot of your followers, I don't watch my crypto portfolio. All of it's long-term. Most of it's in Bitcoin. I legitimately, when people were like, we've been in a bear market, I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. I'm a terrible trader. I'm a terrible when it comes to, my livelihood is not based on, how meme coins are doing, right? Even though...
Most people.
Right, and so I sympathize, but that's why I'm like, so when you understand that's my perspective, I don't necessarily care about the tariff policies like most people because, okay, if the crypto market crashes, that's fine with me, right? I'm just going to continue to buy because I have other sources of income and revenue that I can then put into crypto because I'm like, great time to buy. The stock market and crypto obviously are not a measure of the economy, right? The economy is not the stock market and vice versa, even though they're linked, but they're not the same, right? So the stock market collapsing over uncertainty around tariffs, to me, makes sense, right? And I think we're going to see short-term pain. Scott Bessent even said, we're living in a world where the American economy is addicted to government spending, right? And that's government spending not just in printing money, but also literally doling out that money to subsidize these companies, as we've seen with things like USAID, right? DC is going to have a recession. Your where you're they're going to have, the rest of the country might be fine. That city's going to have a recession, crash in the housing market and everything, which I'm fine with. That's great. Perfect time to buy a home, right? Go and buy a nice house in DC or something. Because of how much government waste we're cutting. But all that's short term. And even the tariffs are, and I'm pro-tariff. I'm very pro-tariff. I think they're an economic, political positive on all ends, which a lot of libertarians disagree with, but they're wrong, which a lot of people in crypto are libertarian-esque, but I'm very pro-tariff, and I think we'll see some pain in the short term, but and I'm interested to see how they make up for that pain, because if we start giving out stimulus checks, right? Because we're cutting waste with Doge, and we say, okay, we know the tariffs on average are costing Americans an extra $5,000, but we've saved you $5,000 through shutting down the Department of Education, so we're giving every American $5,000. Like that will start to help. Like if we reduce or got rid of the income tax, right? Any expense short term that the tariffs create won't matter. So there's all kinds of different avenues that I think they're looking at making up for some of these costs. But the greatest benefit it is, for a matter of fact, bring industry and manufacturing and really good things back to the U.S., which to me I'm very for.
Yeah, that was like the next thing I was going to ask you is like why, because the things you're saying there sound kind of negative. Like what are the positives? But like another thing I kind of want to add, like we just talked about, most people, outside of crypto Twitter, if you go outside and talk to normal people, they're not like the valuation of meme coins and super high risk assets and all this other shit is not an important factor.
They don't even know what it is.
They don't care. They don't know what it is. It doesn't fucking matter. It can fucking dump and the world's going to keep going on, guys. That's the truth. Your meme coin could fucking go from 100 million to zero and, shit's going to still keep going on.
Yep.
And it could, be really good at the same time. So that's like one thing you have to kind of remember and, just be unemotional about the whole thing, I guess. But like, what are, I guess, what would the benefit be like for Americans just in general? Like just take away the whole, I guess, well, it's a part of it, but like what is, I guess, the pitch of why tariffs are good for the average American?
The easiest explanation is first you start with national security, right? So steel or copper or any material which is in anything from buildings to government equipment to technology. Why would you want another country producing all of that stuff when they could at any point in time stop it? Right? So even for strictly national security reasons, we need to edit all these supply chains so that things are built here. And there's a lot of studies around, okay, when you have a manufacturing-based economy, the jobs are better, higher income, right? And when you can produce your own stuff, you have a better, more sound economy and it's more diversified anyway, right? The other thing is people are assuming that tariffs mean it's not an even playing field, but what's happened is other countries have taken predatory practices, which are why a lot of our manufacturing has left. So tariffs are actually equalizing the playing field so that Americans just have more job opportunities, which will lead to economic growth. So supply chains are the biggest thing, and literally restructuring those, bringing jobs back, and good paying jobs, because manufacturing jobs pay very well. And the more you can build here, the better. But people don't understand the compounding effects of some of this stuff. Like the reason semiconductors are manufactured in Taiwan was because when Taiwan in the 60s was like, well, we need to get good at something, they said, we're going to get good at making chips. And it took them 50 to 60 years to perfect it and do really well. And we decided, you know what, we're okay with that, right? Was what we should have done is said, actually, straight from the get-go, we either need to compete with that or we need some of those people over here, right? Because it took them 50 years, now all the expertise are over there. Yeah. So it's not also just about the short term. Like China now is really good at manufacturing because they've been doing it for so long. When we bring manufacturing back here, it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve because not many Americans do it anymore, right? Like there's still plenty of manufacturing, but you think of like a whole population of people who have skilled education in this field, right? Enhancing the best techniques to do manufacturing. So it's compounding effects. And then the third is strategy. So Trump's very obviously using tariffs to get what he wants with things like immigration, for example, or negotiating with the Panama Canal. Like all these different things are just him kind of putting pressure on people to get other foreign policy objectives. Because we can, for a fact, handle tariffs way better than anybody else. We're still the most self-sufficient economy in the world, which is a huge plus.
What would you say about Trump and everything that's going on with Trump in Canada? Trying to say Canada is going to become the 51st state and everything like that. Do you think, obviously it kind of looks like, all right, we're just going to push the limits as a negotiation tactic. Like, hey, we're going to take your whole country basically, and then maybe we'll, is that what you think Trump is thinking in his head? Like,
yeah, what Trump does is he pushes way forward to make the small things look easy. Because Canada is a huge liability. Canada, there were a lot of drugs and a lot of immigrants coming across the border in Canada legally, right? Mm-hmm. And Canada has received a lot of, for example, Chinese influence, right? Canada is a very large liability. And just like with Mexico, when they're your neighbors and Canada has an even larger border, right? And you're not really able to track that and have good relationships, that's a bad thing. Canada, once again, like we subsidize Canada because no one's going to screw with this continent, right? Because we're on it, right? So a lot of it too is just us going, hey, as a matter of fact, we subsidize a lot of what you do, whether you like to hear that or not. Like Canada is able to exist because we're here, right? And Canadians probably don't like to hear that, but to me it's just factual and true, right? Like Russia's not going to invade Canada because we're here.
Yep.
If Canada by itself was left alone, I'm sure Canada would not be totally all there, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's all just negotiation and just trying to get what we want, right? It's interesting.
Yeah. All right. Next thing I kind of want to talk to you about, we talked about it earlier, but what is going on, I guess, in the Florida political sphere when it comes to the 2026 election? And I guess we could talk about what happened recently with Andrew and Tristan Tate, how they came over and they immediately, I guess, got flagged down or something by Ron DeSantis's
Attorney
General, which, in my opinion, I think it's kind of bizarre to do, and I don't think it helped Ron DeSantis at all, really. I don't think that's, I think there was more to lose there for him, just in my opinion, than for him to gain. But I'm curious of your thoughts on why he would do it from a political strategy and all that stuff.
No, so just your basic observation, I think, is spot on. So in Florida, you have the DeSantis camp and you have the Trump camp. And even though DeSantis and Trump have kind of made up, DeSantis still has a dynasty and he wants to promote like his power and influence because where's he going to go? Right? He can't be president. He can't run for Senate. He can't be governor again. So how does he stay relevant? So what's going to happen is DeSantis is going to have his wife, Casey DeSantis, run for governor. Right? If Casey DeSantis runs for governor and wins, DeSantis, by definition, is still involved in the process, right? Yeah. His wife is in charge of the state. Then you have DeSantis appointing Ashley Moody. Ashley Moody was our attorney general to the open Senate seat because Trump chose Marco Rubio, right? So Rubio is no longer a senator. We had to fill the seat. The governor fills that seat. DeSantis could have picked a Trump person and kind of like made that relationship more secure, but no, he decided to pick a DeSantis person, which is Ashley Moody. Then he put, I think it was his chief of staff, as the new attorney general, right, who's also a loyalist. And so you have in Florida for the 2026 election, all that matters is the Republicans, because Democrats can't win here anymore, because it's such a heavy red state now. So all that matters is the Republican primary. So in the Republican primary, you're going to have a DeSantis ticket, and then you're going to have a Trump ticket. And the Trump ticket is people like Byron Donalds, who Trump has openly endorsed.
Yeah.
I think Matt Gaetz might run for the attorney general spot. And if he does, that'll be a part of the Trump ticket, right? So it'll be Matt Gaetz, Byron Donalds. He's a killer on social media. Yeah. He does very, very well. So what I think, and because it is really weird, because I'm not saying Andrew and Tristan Tate are ethically the best people in the world, right? But they're right-wing, right? So they come to Florida, and Florida's Attorney General, James Uthmeyer, decides he's going to prosecute them or open up an investigation, maybe not prosecute. And my gut is telling me the reason he did that was he wanted a media opportunity to take a stand and have his platform for the next election be fighting against sex trafficking, right, as Attorney General. And so they're popular, they're famous, easy target. And so he's trying, because in the primary, who's voting for you? Really, like, not extreme people, but it's always like a different demographic than in a general, right? Because only the most hardcore Republicans will vote in a primary, right? So he's probably thinking, I want to get all these moms on my side. Moms turn out very well and are great voters, right? So if I can get all these moms to vote for me and the DeSantis ticket, that's smart politically. Of course, now, yes, he's just burned political capital by picking a fight with someone who's very famous, who a lot of like kids our age, right, think is cool or decently funny or whatever the term you want to use, mimetic, right? Whether he's cool or not, like he's mimetic.
He's famous,
And now they're just going after him and making fun of him and making him look stupid, which they'll do that forever. I wouldn't be surprised if the Tates come back to Florida to even just harass some of his campaign stuff just because that's what they do. So the reason I think that happened was he was trying to differentiate himself for the primary coming up. It may have ended up hurting him, Because I don't know if a lot of moms know about the Tate brothers. Like, I don't know if, like, in mom circles, that's a huge priority. So I don't know if he looks like a champion for doing this. And now a lot of conservatives, what happened? He went on Patrick Bet-David, who's in Fort Lauderdale.
Yep.
He went on Candace Owens. And they were like, yeah, what are they doing? Why are they?
No, yeah.
Right? And those are big, important voices. So now it makes him look even dumber. So it was a weird political move. I don't, I kind of understand it because he's probably thinking, how can I differentiate myself? And he's on a time limit to do so. Maybe he got word of who his competitor is going to be, and so that's why he was like, I need to make a move now. But I don't know if it was the best move.
It just seemed extremely odd. First of all, it's, the Tates are 2 U.S. citizens and technically have not been convicted of anything. So it's
I didn't know they were U.S. citizens.
There's
to be honest.
They've been in D.C.
They were in Romania for so long. So they're Romanian and U.S. citizens?
Yeah. They were born in D.C.
So their dad's American, but the mom's Romanian? I don't know my Tate lawyer. I don't know my Tate lawyer very well.
Yeah, so the mom's from the UK, and the dad was a former CIA agent. They were both born in DC and lived in America for a little bit. So they're US
How are they
citizens.
in Romania so long, and the American government didn't say?
Yeah, so
that's weird.
Yeah, but anyways, I did find it to be extreme because he is, as people can feel however they want about him, but he is probably one of the largest technical right-wing voices. He's a right-wing voice, and he's basically a political KOL, whether you feel, you don't like him.
Don't like him or not, it is what it is.
And he's also buddies with, Patrick Bet-David, who's a political KOL, and then Candace Owens, and also I think he's friends with, Eric Trump, so he's in there as well. And it's kind of odd, because DeSantis, and, from someone who's not, because you're from Florida, I'm not from Florida, I look at DeSantis as, a very, I guess, fair guy who would never try to do something, kind of wrong to do some political stunt. He didn't, I didn't see him as that guy. And his competitor is Bryson. Is that his name, Bryson? Who's the guy who's Trump's guy?
Oh, I'm sorry. Byron Donalds. Byron Donalds. That's why I was like, oh, no, Byron Donalds.
But what is the sentiment around Byron Donalds? Why does DeSantis feel threatened? Why does he?
Well, because Byron Donalds has a good chance of beating his wife.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, that makes sense.
Byron Donalds is a 6'5", really eloquently speaking black guy.
Yeah.
Right? It's funny. He's a black guy, and he was a congressman over one of the whitest parts of Florida, which is the Southwest, Naples. So obviously very popular, and he's been in the Florida legislature for a while, and just very well liked.
Yeah.
Although not very outspoken until recently. He's not on social media tweeting a bunch and stuff, but I think that's going to start. So I think he is a really big competitor for someone like Casey DeSantis. Yeah, and what's funny is I don't even know if DeSantis knew that his attorney general was going to go after the Tate brothers. For all I know, he could have acted alone, and now DeSantis is like, dude, what are you doing? You know what I mean?
It just seems bizarre, the whole thing.
It is odd. It's people see, and this is what politics is. People are making bets on ways to stay relevant, and someone told them most likely, hey, here's an opportunity to maybe have moms like you, and I think it was going to backfire. I think it's going to backfire.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things we see in politics nowadays is having basically Trump in the past election, he had basically a bunch of KOLs around him, you know, Elon, even Aiden Ross.
I was about to say Aiden Ross, dude.
But Aiden Ross, unironically, probably can carry the vote for young men.
Correct.
Actually, though, he can probably get young men to show up and vote. As much as it doesn't matter what his content is. People, he's able to carry the vote, and it's not the same ball game as it was. I guess back in the day, with traditional media, et cetera. It's basically now how many streamers are endorsing you.
Yeah, for real.
It sounds insane, but that's kind of the world we live in now, And,
well, that's why Gavin Newsom's doing his podcast.
Yep. Yeah, I know. Gavin Newsom's got his podcast. And you talked about Gates earlier, how Gates, probably has a shot at winning. Social media influence when it comes to politics feels like it's almost damn near the whole battle. It feels like.
Not all the time, because
but
you have to make sure you still have the votes in the state. So you can be nationally famous, but if not enough Floridians like you know what I mean? But it is a good percentage of the battle because you can create narrative, challenge narrative, right? Have things written about you, direct attention, but you still need the boots on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I felt about, I guess, DeSantis versus Trump when that first happened. Was like, I mean, DeSantis is, doing a great job with Florida, and I think a lot of people thought he could beat Trump because Trump was kind of really unpopular in the Republican Party at that time.
Well, he had a floor and a ceiling of support, right? And the idea was if Nikki Haley's voters and Vivek's voters actually went to Trump. If Nikki Haley's voters all went to DeSantis, DeSantis may have been able to beat like Trump's ceiling and barely etch it out, right? But then it was the prison photo, and then everyone said, you know what, we're all going to get behind Trump.
Yeah. One thing that happened recently in the Republican Party was the split between, I guess, the tech MAGA.
It was over immigration, right?
Tech
so you
MAGA,
had
like what happened there? Because I saw that and it was just like hardcore MAGA versus, I guess, the new tech right.
Well, you had the biggest thing was a misunderstanding in communication because it was around the H-1B visa, and so a lot of America's visas programs are abused, right? And essentially, like we found out that all these companies were hiring H-1B. An H-1B visa is supposed to be a visa for someone who is so highly skilled that there's a lack of them here in the United States, and we just can't fulfill the demand, so we have to bring in foreign people to do it. So an H-1B visa is that, with a possible or potential of becoming a U.S. citizen down the line, right? But what happens is these corporations actually use H-1B visas for a lot of things, like we found them for just accounting.
Yep.
And what they can do is because they can hold the threat of you getting deported over you, they can essentially depress the wage market for all tech workers and make H-1B visas outcompete like native-born people just by being terrible to them, right? So you had people who see what I just described as a bad thing, and they want to get rid of H-1B visas because we want to train more Americans. But then you have people like Elon Musk who they don't think of what I just described. They think of, there's a nuclear physicist in Iran who we want here because there's like 10 of them in the world or something ridiculous, right? Obviously there's more, but there's so few that it's like we need to grab every person who specializes in nuclear and bring them over here, right? And those are the people who can be game-changing in research and jobs. Like, yes, Elon Musk is an immigrant, but Elon Musk is also like a genius. So how do we get more Elon Musks here? Yeah. But your average H-1B is not Elon Musk. And actually, there's a different type of visa. It's like an H-1A or something. That is for people like Elon Musk. So the division was, well, first that was the miscommunication part. But the division was over hiring Americans or hiring immigrants. And Vivek actually made some bad moves and essentially was like, like these immigrants work hard. Some of them are smarter than Americans. Like they should be here and Americans should compete with the rest of the world. And the other side said, well, the reason I'm American, like being American should mean something.
Yeah.
So being an American should mean that maybe my kid doesn't have to compete with the rest of the world because you're born with the advantages of America. America's supposed to help, not just be an economy for everyone to compete for.
Yeah.
So I think the tech right actually ended up losing that argument culturally. And even though Trump said like he's for H-1Bs and stuff, like these programs are still getting gutted and cutted and reformed, as we saw with one of his recent visa changes, like that Trump Gold Card. That's actually a current visa program that they're editing because the current visa program says like if you invest $1 million in America and create a certain number of jobs, you can apply for a visa. Well, he's just like, no, now you have to give $5 million, right? And then you can just buy it and whatever. So, and that was actually a very healthy debate to have. But it's now water under the bridge because what happened was Susie Wiles, who's the chief of staff, said, none of you are posting on social media anymore. And so that's when you notice they all kind of stopped.
Really? Yeah, I think that's, kind of an interesting thing we saw because I feel like we saw the Democrat Party really split before the election and that definitely hindered them. And having a split party, I mean, there's always going to be debate, but you kind of want the party to be unified. You don't want to have...
You'll always have it over smallish. Like in the grand picture of immigration, like H-1Bs are a smaller thing, right? Like everyone agrees, border stuff, all that, like in general. But then it's like, yeah, what are the small little disagreements? And then that one just got blown out because of some of the things that Vivek said, and it may end up hurting him.
They were going off on him on Twitter. I remember that they were going off, which it makes sense. I definitely agree with the stance that being born in America and being a U.S. citizen should actually mean something.
Yeah, correct.
It shouldn't. It should not be just the world's economy that we all compete for.
Like I should be given a leg up over people overseas in my own country because I expect that to happen in their country, right? Otherwise, there's really no point in being an American. You're just banned. You're born here, but you're treated the same as people on the outside. Doesn't make sense.
And I think it's like, obviously, I don't fucking know, but I think it's pretty rare to find somebody who's like so talented where we would need to, I guess, have this, special visa for them. I feel like most people are not at that level, honestly, that we're getting the visas.
Correct. And like even with manufacturing, the idea is, well, if these companies couldn't just rely on a visa, what would they have to do? They'd have to raise wages and train Americans. So this is just large corporations being lazy.
Yeah.
Right? There's no such thing as jobs Americans won't do. There's no such thing as Americans not wanting to do certain things. Those are code terms for we just want to treat people like crap and pay them terrible wages. We're not willing to pay them enough, right? Like Americans will do a lot of things if you pay them a fair wage.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely like a whole pressing issue, I guess, within America because we have such a capitalist society. It's like where do we draw the line at? We want to be the best in business, and also we want to sustain a quality of life.
Yeah, 100%.
Enjoy, because at the end of the day, it's like, the point. I don't know. I mean, everyone has their different, perspective on life, I guess. But I think most people in general wouldn't want to sacrifice their quality of life for some billionaire to make a couple extra billion and for Amazon to make more money.
Well, and Grant Cardone said something which really, I thought was insane for him to say. And if he runs for governor in California, it's going to kill his election there. But he said it on Twitter Spaces, and I'll never forget it because I think he was being very sincere, and he's not a bad person, but this is how boomers think, right? Because it's also a generational thing. He's like, if I had 5 Americans and 5 immigrants who were all completely equal in skill, I'd pick the immigrants, right?
Grant Cardone said that?
Grant Cardone said that on a Twitter space, and maybe it's recorded. But I was like, that's the problem. The problem is, the problem is you have an older generation. I know, the problem is because he thinks, they got more hustle or whatever, even though they're exact same talent or whatever. But see, you want to talk boomerism. So boomers grew up, created this environment, and then are punishing their children for the environment they created. So you get a double whammy if you're born in our generation, because you have people like that who genuinely believe in those opinions, who are like, yeah, the kids just don't work today, they don't hustle, when they're the ones who destroyed that environment to where there's not much to hustle for, because percentage-wise, all your payment and quality of life is down. Yep. And then they're telling you, even when you work harder for a worse quality of life, I'd still rather hire someone who has nothing to do with my country. One, that kills any political ambition you have. But that is how a lot of people in power and a lot of these older people think, and it's terrible. It's a terrible ideology, and to me, a very un-American way of thinking.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting you bring that up, because I personally feel like interestingly enough, I think Gen Z is probably Gen Z is actually very right-wing, a part of it.
Gen Z hustles. I mean, it's I find it very funny hearing these people talk about the kids today not working. It's just a different culture, and I don't think they understand the way they work, the way in which these generations work. And I'm not trying to roast boomers or any one specific generation, because I believe in balance, and I believe the boomer generation is all these generations balance each other out, and they all have negatives and they all have positives, right? And the hope is that they all work together and the positives outweigh the negatives. It's just that, specifically with the current generation in power, with the example I've just described, they've created an environment and then they haven't witnessed their own solution, right? And Gen Z will have its own problems 100%. Yeah. But the way Gen Z works, Like Gen Z, in my opinion, is like a more positive, more fun generation, whereas millennials are a little bit more doomer and a little bit more depressing, right? Like Gen X. So I think there's like it's just generational stuff.
Yeah, pretty pretty interesting stuff. Yeah, for sure. Because I see a lot of the like a lot of the, you know, if you're a young male Gen Z following a lot of these right wing influencers, a lot of the extreme right wing influencers are the popular ones, honestly.
Yeah.
The extremists, which is like kind of an interesting thing, and I think something that's kind of changed over the past couple of years. Because if you think about like the large right wing influencers and left wing influencers, they're basically the extremists of both sides, kind of.
Yeah,
Not all of them,
that's
but
fair. That's
I would
fair.
say like, okay, this is my perspective on, I guess, the right wing for Gen Z. I would say like left wing would be kind of Destiny and Hassan Piker, who are both, I guess, would be considered probably like left wing extremists. And for the right, I would say, you know, honestly, probably people like Nick Fuentes and Tate, you know, and obviously, you know, Nick Fuentes would be considered, you know, alt right, etc.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting because that's where I see a lot of, you know, young males gravitating towards like one of those two sides. So kind of an interesting time.
It'll be interesting now that Trump's president, though, because I think generations gravitate toward whatever is taboo. And so because stuff like the Nick Fuentes and Tate was taboo, right, it's cool and it's edgy.
Yeah.
But if with Republicans in power and that cultural shift, I have a feeling some of those voices are actually going to lessen in influence. And I'm not saying that's because they become mainstream or because other more moderate voices, but it's just, it's not cool anymore because it's not edgy. So it's like, what's the next edgy thing, right? But remember, once again, with the boomers, they rebelled against their parents. And that's why they were hippies, right? And so Zoomers are kind of like the anti-hippie, right? Where it's like, okay, well, the hippies took over and made all this stuff to where you're mandated to do whatever boomers or that culture created. And so to rebel against that was what was cool, right? So then it's like, okay, well, what's the next cool thing gonna be? So I think, like even the Tate brothers, I think they'll stay influential for quite some time, and they've done really good at navigating that because they're business and politics. But there's always going to be someone new, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's because over the past couple of years, I mean, we saw that the Tate brothers came up and everything, and then Nick Fuentes is kind of like, I guess, the really popular guy on X right now. I mean, he gets like crazy engagement.
But see, I didn't know he still was popular. I legitimately didn't. Like I thought, in my personal opinion, I thought he fell off because I remember 2 or 3 years ago, he would keep popping up, and now I do not see his stuff that often.
It's ever since he came back on X, because I had been following him for a long time.
But he went anti-Trump and went really stupid.
Yeah, I think that was a bad take, like from him before the election, trying to push against the Trump campaign when it's like, well, it's either Trump or Kamala, like, you know.
Like, what's the
like, bro? You're not like.
Some of these people kill their brands by not being consistent. That's what DeSantis did. DeSantis, if he would have been pro-Trump, people would still be like, best governor ever. But because he did weird stuff and went anti-Trump, it really tarnished his brand.
The MAGA call is not one to go against, I feel like.
Yeah, but it's also just, it's reading the room, like knowing the moment. And like that was Trump's moment. Like why would you, like Vivek played that well. Vivek was like, I like Trump. I think I should just be even more Trump than Trump. If DeSantis had done what Vivek did, I think DeSantis would be in a really powerful position right now. But he didn't.
Yeah, and I remember the Republican primaries when they had the debate and they asked that question, would you pardon Donald Trump? And Vivek was the only one who immediately put up his hand.
Yeah, everyone else literally looked around.
Was like, which looked really bad for him, honestly.
Looked terrible.
It's like, you know, you're supposed to come out and be the guy who's like, no, we're going to free him. And obviously, I think Vivek knew he was going to lose the whole time, and he was just like, all right, how can I get myself?
He was part of a Trump plant probably, and then part knew yeah, this is my win, this is my way in. Yeah.
All right. Well, we've talked about a lot of things. You know, we covered the Florida Bitcoin space. What are, I guess, some final thoughts, or what are some things we could, I guess, expect from you in the future when it comes to the political sphere in Florida and everything?
I don't know. We'll know in the next 2 months whether my Bitcoin Reserve bill passes in Florida. And then obviously just getting more involved at the federal and national level with certain projects. So probably expect to see some stuff like that come out, different legislation that we're working on there. And other than that, not much. Just vibing, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, just living the dream.
Yeah.
There's a lot of what I do that I don't talk about, right? Like all the side hustles that we do and all the fun stuff that maybe I'll start getting more into.
Yeah, maybe we could talk about that on a different podcast. That'd actually be a good one to do next time I talk to you. Talk more about how you got into this and everything. How you know, if you're a young kid, what do you do if they want to be like you? But yeah, also I guess shout out your socials.
Yeah, just Samuel Arms on Twitter. On X. I still say Twitter.
Yeah.
Maybe that makes me old, and I say X plenty, but just saying X to me still just feels weird. Like, follow me on X, or it's just X. Or I X'd something. It's really because I say I tweeted.
Yep.
I don't say I X'd. How do you say I X'd it?
You don't.
Do you still say I tweeted?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's why.
X, but I don't call it tweet. I call it tweeted and X.
See, that's where my mind screws up. Is I'm like, I posted on X, but I'm like, oh yeah, I sent a tweet or whatever. YouTube, TikTok, Instagram.
Yeah, Sam has like, if I had to evaluate your channel, I think you have like the best. If you're like really into politics and purely politics, like you have the best kind of content because you really know your shit. And I feel like a lot of the political people who are popular. Like, honestly, it's just a lot of emotional, like, rage bait garbage.
Yeah, pretty much.
Essentially, where that's. I feel
which
like
maybe I should start doing that. Maybe
I was about to say, like, maybe you should be leaning into that a little bit more, because that's what I see a lot of from these other guys. But yeah, Sam has a lot of really good content and everything. And also, if you enjoyed this, you know, we're gonna be doing more content with Sam in the future and everything. You know, I've known Sam for a while. Make sure to follow me, Aaron Bremser _ on X, Aaron Bremser on the rest of the platforms, YouTube, TikTok, etc. And yeah, thank you for watching.